I apologise for the delay since my last video. I've been somewhat under the weather, but let's continue with Genesis. My last one, we covered the first two verses, how things were when God began to create, and the earth was without form and waste. Now we continue from verse 3. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. And God said, "Let there be a dome in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." So God made the dome, and separated the waters that were under the dome from the waters that were above the dome. And it was so. God called the dome sky. And there was evening, and there was morning, the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the sky be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And the God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the earth put forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees of every kind on earth that bear fruit with a seed in it." And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed of every kind, and the trees of every kind bearing fruit with a seed in it. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the third day. And God said, "Let there be lights in the dome of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth." And it was so. God made the two great lights, a greater light to rule the day, and a lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. God set them in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fourth day. That's probably about as much as I can cover in one video. So God began by speaking light into being. Occasionally I hear preachers talking about God speaking things into existence, but this is the only example. He just says, "Let there be light," and there is. The darkness isn't mentioned because it is part of the pre-existing chaos. And then he goes on to say, "Let there be a dome in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." Dome, firmament, sky, however you want to translate it. The word is one that usually denotes a sheet of metal. It's something solid. It has to be, to separate the waters above the sky from the waters below the sky. And it's not as silly as it sounds. Obviously, this was a pre-scientific society. They knew that water fell out of the sky in large quantities and landed on their heads and on their fields on a rather regular basis. They also knew that if they dug a hole deep enough, they'd find water seeping into it, forming a well. This is an etiology. It's a story told to explain that. Water falls from the sky because there's an awful lot of it up there. And if you read the flood story, you find that God caused the flood by opening the trapdoors or windows or sluice gates or whatever the translation you're using has of heaven, letting the water through, opening up the fountains of the great deep, and once again letting the waters through, breaking down, in fact, the barriers that is said to have set up at creation. Here he's dividing it. In a flood story, he breaks it all down again and lets the chaos return. So we have an awful lot of water up there, the waters above, and something solid separating it from the waters below. A vast dome covering the sky, the earth. It's how it was commonly understood by the biblical authors. We don't know, of course, whether this is literally how they imagined a three-tier universe with God up there somewhere. According to Psalm 104, the foundations of his palace are set up on the waters, presumably the waters above, and then the water below him, the waters, then the sky, then the earth, and waters around it and below it, or whether this was just a conventional way of speaking about it. Because the one thing we do know is that a devout Greek priest called Eratosthenes, who was head of the great library of Alexandria, measured the diameter of the earth accurately around 200 BC. Obviously, a few centuries after Genesis was put together. But he went to so much trouble to do it that he must have known perfectly well that the earth was round before he even thought of measuring. We don't know when they discovered that it was round, and we don't know how far the knowledge had spread. So what was in the mind of the people who wrote these stories, we just don't know. To this day, we speak sometimes of the four corners of the earth, don't we? We know it doesn't have corners. This may be an extended metaphor, it may not. We just can't tell. And then the story goes on. Let the waters under the sky be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. We have this continuing emphasis, of course, on God seeing that everything was good. And here we have, once again, God dividing. This time he's dividing the land from the seas. So we have the waters divided from the waters, the day divided from the night, land divided from the seas. Creation is coming into shape out of chaos, in fact. And then we get a bit of a shift appearing. Then God said, let the earth put forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees of every kind on earth that bears fruit with a seed in it. And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed of every kind, and trees of every kind bearing fruit with a seed in it. And God saw that it was good. So God starts creating through what, with a scientific background, I have a degree in geology with a couple of years of zoology and one of botany along the way. With that background, I look at this, and it's very difficult not to see God using natural processes. Obviously, the ancient Israelites were very well aware of the fact that plants produced seed, and if you planted that seed, you'd get a crop. That was the whole basis of their society, their economy, their culture. Everything revolved around the crops. And there seems to be a continuity between God creating and the plants germinating and growing. Whether it's the earth bringing forth or God creating directly, it's all part of God's creation. And when it comes to the natural world, he begins with the basic stuff that's very, very different from human beings. He begins with the plants, and as we'll see next time, he moves closer and closer to us until finally he creates humanity. And God said, "Let there be lights in the dome of the sky, to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years, and let them be lights in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth." And it was so. God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. God set them in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the fourth day. So God is still separating. He's now completed that process. It overlaps with telling the earth to bring forth. And now it's the sun, moon and stars. The planets, the wandering stars as they were seen back then, aren't mentioned. Of course, the sun, the moon and the planets were great gods back in that era. Here they're explicitly reduced to lights, the planets not even being mentioned. It's a major demotion. The stars were seen as lesser gods, and sure enough we've got regular references in the Old Testament to the heavenly host, the army of God, or the gods. Monotheism didn't exist when this was written. The Israelites, or at least the ones who produced the Old Testament, believed that there were many gods, but Israelites should only be worshipping one of them. So not only is the great sea monster, as I said last time, out of the picture altogether, great gods are now removed and they're mere lights. There's an element of polemic in this, I think, against the creation schemes and the pantheons of the surrounding nations. They're still working within the same framework of creation out of chaos, but this time the story's changed. God is clearly in charge throughout, and the other gods are nowhere. And the lights and the stars are created for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. For the calendar, for knowing whether it's morning or afternoon or evening, and for signs. We've got a few examples of that in the Bible. The obvious one, I think, is the star over Bethlehem, which you find in Matthew's account of Jesus' birth, a sign of a Messiah. Astrology, of course, was perfectly respectable back then. It remained respectable up until about the end of the 17th century, when astronomy was starting to develop to the point where they could debunk it. Nobody in biblical times would have seen anything wrong with looking in the stars to find a sign. God, of course, sees that it's all good. I'll leave it there, and we can continue with the rest of the 6 days of creation next time. Bye.